Well, hello there. You guys ready to finish up chapter 2? So, just as a very quick summary and synopsis, George and Lenny camped by the river last night, and then the next day they came into the ranch and they met Candy. He's the old one handed swamper, the old man. The boss comes in and does some of the official paperwork, and he's kind of angry. Well, you guys were supposed to be here this morning. George goes, yeah, well, the bus driver lied to us. And then Curly comes in and he wants to talk to the big guy. Let the big guy talk. And George is like, why do you want to talk with the big guy? Why are you causing trouble? And then Curly leaves. And so now we're on page 27. George was watching the door. He said ominously, well, he better watch out for Lenny. Lenny ain't no fighter, but Lenny's strong and quick. And Lenny don't know no rules. He walked to the square table and sat down on one of the boxes. He gathered some of the cards together and shuffled them. The old man sat down on another box. Don't tell Curly I said none of this. He'd slough me. He just don't give a damn. Won't ever get canned 'cause his old man's the boss. George cut the cards and began turning them over, looking at each one and throwing it on a pile. He said, this Curly guy sounds like a son of a bitch to me. I don't like mean little guys. Seems like he's worse lately, said the swamper. He got married a couple weeks ago. Wife lives over in the boss's house. Seems like Curly is cockier than ever since he got married. George grunted. Huh, maybe he's showing off for his wife. The swamper warmed to the gossip. You seen that glove on his left hand? Yeah, I seen it. Well, that glove's full of Vaseline. Vaseline? What the hell for? Well, I tell you what. Curly says he's keeping the hand soft for his wife. George studied the cards absorbedly. That's a dirty thing to tell around, he said. The old man felt reassured. He had drawn a derogatory statement from George. He felt safe now, and he spoke more confidently. Wait till you see Curly's wife. George cut the cards again and put out a solitaire lay, slow and deliberately. Purty? He asked casually. Yeah, Purty. But... George studied his cards. But what? Well, she got the eye. Yeah? Married 2 weeks and got the eye? Maybe that's why Curly's pants is full of ants. I seen her give Slim the eye. Slim's a jerk-line Skinner. Hell of a nice fella. Slim don't need to wear no high-heel boots on a grain team. I seen her give Slim the eye. Curly never seen it. And I seen her give Carlson the eye. George pretended a lack of interest. Looks like we was going to have fun. The swamper stood up from his box. Know what I think? George did not answer. Well, I think Curly's married a tart. He ain't the first, said George. There's plenty done that. The old man moved toward the door, and his ancient dog lifted his head and peered about, and then got painfully to his feet to follow. I gotta be setting out the wash basins for the guys. The teams will be in before long. You guys gonna buck barley? Yeah. You won't tell Curly nothing I said? Hell no. Well, you look her over, mister. You see if she ain't a tart. He stepped out the door into the brilliant sunshine. George laid down his cards thoughtfully, turned his piles of threes. He built 4 clubs on his ace pile. The sun square was on the floor now, and the flies whipped through it like sparks. A sound of jingling harness and the croak of heavy-laden axles sounded from outside. From the distance came a clear call. "Stay a buck! Oh, stay a buck!" And then, "Where the hell is that goddamn guy?" George stared at his solitaire lay, and then he flounced the cards together and turned around to Lenny. Lenny was lying down on the bunk watching him. "Look, Lenny, this here ain't no setup. I'm scared. You're gonna have trouble with that Curly guy." "I've seen that kind before. He was kind of feeling you out. He figures he's got you scared. He's going to take a sock at you the first chance he gets." Lenny's eyes were frightened. "I don't want no trouble," he said plaintively. "Don't let him sock me, George." George got up and went over to Lenny's bunk and sat down on it. "I hate that kind of bastard," he said. "I've seen plenty of 'em. Like the old guy says, Curly don't take no chances. He always wins." He thought for a moment. "If he tangles with you, Lenny, we're going to get the can. Don't make no mistake about that. He's the boss's son. Look, Lenny, you try to keep away from him, will you? Don't never speak to him. If he comes in here, you move clear to the other side of the room. Will you do that, Lenny?" "I don't want no trouble," Lenny mourned. "I never done nothing to him." "Well, that won't do you no good if Curly wants to plug himself up for a fighter. And just don't have nothing to do with him. Will you remember?" Dort. I ain't going to say a word." The sound of the approaching grain teams was louder. Thud of big hooves and on hard ground, drag of brakes and the jingle of trace chains. Men were calling back and forth from the teams. George, sitting on the bunk beside Lenny, frowned as he thought. Lenny asked timidly, "You ain't mad, George?" "I ain't mad at you. I'm mad at this here Curly bastard. I hoped we was going to get a little steak together. Maybe $100. His tone grew decisive. "You keep away from Curly, Lenny." "Sure I will, George. I won't say a word." "Don't let him pull you in." "But if the son of a bitch socks you, let him have it." "Let him have what, George?" Never mind. I'll tell you when. I hate that kind of guy. Look, Lenny, if you ever get in any kind of trouble, you remember what I told you to do?" Lenny raised up on his elbows, his face contorted with thought. Then his eyes moved sadly to George's face. "If I get in any trouble, you ain't gonna let me tend the rabbits." That's not what I meant. You remember where we slept last night? Down by the river?" "Yeah, I remember." Oh, sure, I remember. I go there and hide in the brush." "Hide till I come for you. Don't let nobody see you. Hide in the brush by the river." Say that over. "Hide in the brush by the river. Down in the brush by the river. If you get in trouble." "If I get in trouble." A brake screeched outside. A call came. "Stay a buck! Oh, stay a buck!" George said, "Say it over to yourself, Lenny, so you won't forget it." Both men glanced up, for the rectangle of sunshine in the doorway was cut off. A girl was standing there looking in. She had full, rouged lips and wide-spaced eyes, heavily made up. Her fingernails were red. Her hair hung in little rolled clusters like sausages. She wore a cotton-house dress and red mules on the insteps, of which were little bouquets of red ostrich feathers. "I'm looking for Curly," she said. Her voice had a nasal, brittle quality. George looked away from her, then back. "He was in here a minute ago, but he went." "Oh." She put her hands behind her back and leaned against the door frame so that her body was thrown forward. "You the new fellas that just come in, ain't you?" Yeah. Lenny's eyes moved down over her body, and though she did not seem to be looking at Lenny, she bridled a little. She looked at her fingernails. Sometimes Curly's in here, she explained. George said brusquely, Well, he ain't now. If he ain't, I guess I better look someplace else, she said playfully. Lenny watched her, fascinated. George said, If I see him, I'll pass the word you was looking for him. She smiled archly and twitched her body. Nobody can't blame a person for looking, she said. There were footsteps behind her, going by. She turned her head. Hi, Slim, she said. Slim's voice came through the door. Hi, good looking. I'm trying to find Curly, Slim. Well, you ain't trying very hard. I seen him going in your house. She was suddenly apprehensive. Bye, boys, she called into the bunkhouse, and she hurried away. George looked around at Lenny. Jesus, what a tramp, he said. So that's what Curly picks for a wife? Teeth purty, said Lenny defensively. Yeah, and she's sure hiding it. Curly got his work ahead of him. Bet she'd clear out for $20. Lenny still stared at the doorway where she had been. Gosh, she was purty. He smiled admiringly. George looked quickly down at him and then took him by an ear and shook him. Listen to me, you crazy bastard, he said fiercely. Don't you ever take a look at that bitch. I don't care what she says and what she does. I seen him poison before, but I never seen no piece of jailbait worse than her. You leave her be. Lenny tried to disengage his ear. I never done nothing, George. No, you never. But when she was standing in the doorway showing her legs, you wasn't looking the other way neither. I never meant no harm, George. Honest, I never. Well, you keep away from her, 'cause she's a rat trap if I ever see one. You let Curly take the rap. He let himself in for a glove full of Vaseline, George said disgustedly. And I bet he's eating raw eggs and right into the patent medicine houses. Lenny cried out suddenly. I don't like this place, George. This ain't no good place. I want to get out of here. We got to keep it till we get a steak. We can't help it, Lenny. We'll get out just as soon as we can. I don't like it no better than you do. He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire lay. No, I don't like it, he said. For 2 bits, I'd shove out of here. If we can just get a few dollars in the poke, we'll shove off and go up the American River and pan gold. We can maybe make a couple of dollars a day there, and we might hit a pocket. Lenny leaned eagerly toward him. Let's go, George. Let's get out of here. It's mean here. We gotta stay, George said shortly. Shut up now. The guys will be coming in. From the washroom nearby came the sound of running water and rattling basins. George studied the cards. Maybe we ought to wash up, he said. But we ain't done nothing to get dirty. A tall man stood in the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he combed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others, he wore blue jeans, a short denim jacket. When he had finished combing his hair, he moved into the room, and he moved with a majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsmen. He was a jerkline skinner, the prince of the ranch, capable of driving 10, 16, even 20 mules with a single line to the leaders. He was capable of killing a fly on the wheeler's butt with a bullwhip without touching the mule. There was a gravity in his manner and a quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. His authority was so great that his word was taken on any subject, be it politics or love. This was Slim, the jerk-line Skinner. His hatchet face was ageless. He might have been 35 or 50. His ear had heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. His hands, large and lean, were as delicate in their action as those of a temple dancer. He smoothed out his crushed hat, creased it in the middle, and put it on. He looked kindly at the two in the bunkhouse. "It's brighter than a bitch outside," he said gently. "Can't hardly see nothing in here." "You the new guys?" "Just come," said George. "Gonna buck barley?" "That's what the boss says." Slim sat down on a box across the table from George. He studied the solitaire hand that was upside down to him. "Hope you get on my team," he said. His voice was very gentle. "I got a pair of punks on my team that don't know a barley bag from a blue ball. You guys ever bucked any barley?" "Hell yes," said George. "I ain't nothing to scream about, but that big bastard there can put up more grain alone than most pears can." Lenny, who had been following the conversation back and forth with his eyes, smiled complacently at the compliment. Slim looked approvingly at George for having given the compliment. He leaned over the table and snapped the corner of a loose card. "You guys travel around together?" His tone was friendly. It invited confidence without demanding it. "Sure," said George. "We kind of look after each other." He indicated Lenny with his thumb. "He ain't bright. Hell of a good worker, though. Hell of a nice fella, but he ain't bright. I've knew him for a long time." Slim looked through George and beyond him. "Ain't many guys travel around together," he mused. "I don't know why. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other." "It's a lot nicer to go around with a guy you know," said George. A powerful, big-stomached man came into the bunkhouse. His head still dripped water from the scrubbing and dousing. "Hi, Slim," he said, then stopped and stared at George and Lenny. "These guys just come," said Slim by way of introduction. "Glad to meet you," the big man said. "My name's Carlson." "I'm George Milton. This here's Lenny Small." "Glad to meet you," Carlson said again. "He ain't very small." He chuckled softly at his joke. "Ain't small at all," he repeated. "Meant to ask you, Slim, how's your bitch? I seen she wasn't under your wagon this morning." "She slang her pups last night," said Slim. 9 of them. I drowned 4 of them right off. She couldn't feed that many." "Got 5 left, huh?" "Yeah, 5. I kept the biggest." "What kind of dogs you think they're gonna be?" "I don't know," said Slim. "Some kind of shepherds, I guess. That's the most kind I seen around here when she was in heat." Carlson went on. "Got 5 pups, huh? Gonna keep all of them?" "I don't know. Have to keep them a while so they can drink Lulu's milk." Carlson said thoughtfully. "Well, look a here, Slim. I've been thinking. That dog of Candy's is so goddamn old he can't hardly walk. Stinks like hell, too. Every time he comes in the bunkhouse, I can smell him for 2-3 days. Why'd you get Candy to shoot his old dog and give him one of the pups to raise up? I can smell that dog a mile away. Got no teeth. Damn near blind. Can't eat. Candy feeds him milk. Can't chew nothing else." George had been staring intently at Slim. Suddenly, a triangle began to ring outside, slowly at first, and then faster and faster until the beat of it disappeared into one ringing sound. It stopped as suddenly as it had started. "There she goes," said Carlson. Outside there was a burst of voices as a group of men went by. Slim stood up slowly and with dignity. "You guys better come on while there's still something to eat. Won't be nothing left in a couple of minutes." Carlson stepped back to let Slim precede him, and then the 2 of them went out the door. Lenny was watching George excitedly. George rumpled his cards into a messy pile. "Yeah," George said, "I heard him, Lenny. I'll ask him. A brown and white one, Lenny cried excitedly. Come on, let's get dinner. I don't know whether he's got a brown and white one. Lenny didn't move from his bunk. You asked him right away, George, so it won't kill no more of 'em. Sure. Come on now. Get up on your feet. Lenny rolled off his bunk and stood up, and the two of them started for the door. Just as they reached it, Curly bounced in. You seen a girl around here? He demanded angrily. George said coldly. About half-hour ago, maybe. Well, what the hell was she doing? George stood still, watching the angry little man. He said insultingly, She said she was looking for you. Curly seemed really to see George for the first time. His eyes flashed over George, took in his height, measured his reach, looked at his trim middle. Well, which way'd she go? He demanded at last. I don't know, said George. I didn't watch her go. Curly scowled at him and, turning, hurried out the door. George said, You know, Lenny, I'm scared I'm going to tangle with that bastard myself. I hate his guts. Jesus Christ. Come on. There won't be a damn thing left to eat. They went out the door. The sunshine lay in a thin line under the window. From a distance, there could be heard a rattle of dishes. After a moment, the ancient dog walked lamely in through the open door. He gazed about with mild, half-blind eyes. He sniffed, and then lay down and put his head between his paws. Curly popped into the doorway again and stood looking into the room. The dog raised his head, but when Curly jerked out, the grizzled head sank to the floor again. Ooh, so many things to talk about, but I'm afraid we have just gone probably longer than we should. So we will come back and discuss what has happened in this part of the chapter later on. So for now, I think we're just going to pause because I'm probably going to take a whole nother 20 minutes to just get through this. So, all right. I hope you're enjoying the story. We've got some more characters in the story and lots of good things to discuss. So we will save the analysis for another time. Till then, bye-bye.